happy Mother's Day. Today's Mother's Day. So you're going to sing a song that's like relevant for Mother's Day. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm thinking on Mother's Day about my mom and her sister, that is my aunt. And they sang this song often, and this is my mother's favorite song. My grandmother also sang this. Probably my great-grandparents also sang the same song. So it has a lot of meaning for me.
That's really pretty neat that I'll be listening to songs that maybe my great-grandparents had sang. So where is this song from? Is it, yeah.
I think it is from Mirzapur region, and it is a very old folk song, and the type of song is called Nirgun. Has two different meanings. One is a young girl going to her husband's house first time, leaving her family behind. And then the second meaning is every line can be interpreted in two different ways. So the second is a soul is going to God's place.
And Mirzapur is the region that you grew up in India.
Yeah.
And then after the song, we'll go line by line and you will describe what it is. And then as you're singing, I'll put superimpose the general meaning of each line, but then you'll go over it at the end of the song. Okay, very cool. All right, I'm looking forward to it.
Hari jo gavanwa mange aisi badri mein Hari mor gavanwa mange bhai bahin roe ladka parani roe bhaujit roe बैठे बखरी में हरि मोर गवनवा मांगे चार जने मिली डोलिया सजावे हो रामा ढाके तो पिलई है कोरी चुनरी में गवनवा मांगे जाय के उतारे गंगा के किनारे हो रामा पनिया के मांगे कोरी गगरी में हरि मोर गवनवा मांगे सुनहु न सखिया सुनहु सहेलिया सुनहु न सखिया सुनहु सहेलिया अब न अवनवा हुई है तोरी नगरी में हरि जो गवनवा मांगे ऐसी बदरी में हरि गवनवा मांगे.
So this song that you just sang has two meanings for every single sentence. So maybe now you can go sentence by sentence and you can say the words in Hindi and then give the literal definition or translation, and then kind of what it means.
Okay. Hari ju gavanwa mange aisi badri mein. The literal translation is so cloudy and so gloomy, and then my husband or the God is asking me to go.
And so for death, I understand this because when someone dies, everyone's really sad, the soul is going up, it's a gloomy day. But why for a wedding or a marriage? Okay, fine, the daughter has been married and now she's going to go off to her husband's house. Wouldn't this be a happy day? Why is it considered gloomy?
In ancient India, girls had no choice in marriage. It was arranged by family. and they were married young and didn't go with husband immediately. At some point, husband sets the date for his wife's departure, but after leaving parental home, meeting with parents and friends and coming back to her own house depended on husband and his family and many other factors depending on where was she married and how would she commute back to her home, things like that. So for that reason the departure day was a sad day. That is why it is represented as a cloudy and gloomy day in the song.
And it's interesting because, in older India, I mean, this is not even ancient. This is like around your time when you were young.
Yeah.
Maybe in the villages, even now, even now, so, often the women would be very young, right? Like teenagers, late teenage, something like that, right?
Yeah. My mother was 13-year-old when she was married.
So so you're going, and you're young and you'll be going away from your family and it's kind of scary. And the other thing is that, unlike here where maybe you fall in love or maybe in modern India, back then because it was arranged, you don't really know who this person is. So you're going into like a household as a young person, you don't know who your husband is or his family, how they'll treat you, and everything about your life depends on how these people are going to treat you. So it's very scary.
Yeah. It's not only treat you, but because the women were not that much independent, that they were educated, they had financial security, or they knew how to take a train and go, but it would be considered really bad if a woman started going back to her home if in-laws didn't agree to that. So that's sort of
so it is, yeah. Okay, next line.
So then
sing it or say it.
भाई बहन रोए लड़का परानी रोए भौजी तो रोए बैठी बखरी में. So as you saw that both interpretations have marriage and death have themes of sadness, departure, transition, and uncertainty. So brother, sister, and all other friends and family, everybody, when the bride is leaving for death, you already know why everybody is crying when somebody dies. But for a marriage also, for that reason, everybody's sitting there and crying. And the sister-in-law, it's a funny way of saying, it's a cultural thing, that there is always represented in Indian culture and songs that the girl of the house and the sister-in-law, brother's wife, always have some sort of conflicting relationship. So she's represented that she's also sitting and feeling sad, but less than all other family members are crying in there.
It's funny and it's interesting, and initially I didn't understand this, so you had to explain it to me. But so when, let's say, you're a young woman, you're going to be married, you go into your, husband's household, the mother-in-law is kind of like in charge of everything.
Yeah.
So she in some ways is the scariest,
yes,
right?
Definitely.
And so like that's first of all like a relationship that's maybe people outside the system don't understand. But then also the sister of the husband will be there. The sister of the husband may not have to cook, may not have all the responsibilities. But and this was also like when I was going in my romantic interviews, when I was thinking about, I was asking people, and people in India who are part of the arranged marriage would be like, the reason you bring in a wife is so that she takes care of your mother.
Yeah.
And so this young child or whatever who's getting married, her duties now are to take care of her mother-in-law. And, so it makes sense that there'll be conflict with the husband's sister who doesn't really have all those obligations in a way. But then even in this song, the sister of the family is feeling a little sad, but not as sad, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what it is.
The other thing is when you're saying this, not singing it, but just saying it, so you're speaking it in Mirzapuri, right?
Yeah.
So the people who don't, can't pick up the dialects in Hindi, there's like straight Hindi, and then there's like the Mirzapuri, it's like a dialect, and it sounds really cool. And so my mom is saying it in her regional dialect. Okay, cool. Next line.
So चार जने मिल डोलिया उठावे रामा. So the 4 people carry the bride to her husband's place. as well as the dead body to the cremation ground that you can see in the picture on the left and on the right.
Were you carried, or was that like even more old school India?
It's even more old. I mean, I was not in Dolly, so yeah. But usually that's how it happens.
Interesting. When I did go to India, like when I was in Mirzapur and I was part of that like cremation, what do they call it? Like the matti, or what is it called?
हाँ, मट्टी उठाना.
Yeah, but so when I went to that ceremony, the body was like it was on that. So even now, at least in the villages,
even in Mirzapur, the death one is still that, but Doli is not that. Now people take the bride in car and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. In Mirzapur, I saw that they were actually had that for the dead person.
Yeah. That still continues.
Interesting.
Yeah. ढाक की टोपी ली है कोरी चुनरी में. So the being covered in new clothing is also very, very important for the bride and as well as for the dead body. They both are bathed and they both are massaged with oil, things like that, and they are wearing, as you can see in the left, that's actually me. So my face or anything, nothing you can see there, so it's all covered inside. That's all again traditional. Now these days people have a lot of makeup and they do a lot of jaimala, so it's all different now, but I think this is how in olden days people did it.
But the dead body before it is cremated, you're saying, is covered in oil and is massaged, or like it's
bathed and massaged and then a new clothing
on the dead body.
They can't even put the used clothing on it, so जाय के उतारे गंगा के किनारे रामा, and then they carry the body, or even that 4 people carry the bride and bring it to Ganga River. The Ganga River is extremely important for both rituals, death and the bride.
So, for the death, when I was in Mirzapur, I saw them bring the body there. I saw the burning process. I've never seen a married person go to. So they do that? Like
they stop over there, and sometime this particular song is representing one particular probably woman whose husband lived across the river.
I see.
So you need to go there, but there are rituals after a wedding. You definitely go to Ganga River.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Not in that Doli, but you definitely go in the Ganga River to do certain things there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Paniya ki mange kori gagari mein. So then the new pot is extremely important as well as the other things. The difference is the wedding pots are decorated, colorful, and then the death pot is plain, and then at the end of the day the water is going through and then they break the pot. You must have seen that.
So it's interesting because these pots, and for people who are not as familiar, in the villages is one of the main ways that you hold water, and it's usually made from the earth of that village, or it's maybe somewhere nearby. But and when I had seen the death thing, not only do they break it during the ceremony, but then after that for 10 days or something.
There's different pots, but I think so that's why pots are very, very important in both rituals.
In both rituals, yeah.
So lastly, सुनहु न सखिया सुनहु सहेलिया अब न अवनवा हुई है तोरी नगरी में, meaning, oh dear friends, I may not come back to meet you again, or something like that. So for soul or for the human, you can understand easily, that makes sense. But then in the case of the bride also, similarly, her friends would be married to a different town, a different city, who knows where she will be married, and it's not necessarily that they both come back at the same time. So I think if the bride has a little bit time, she would prefer to go to her parents' house rather than going to her friend's house. So it just becomes really final goodbye or something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting because it is essentially the death of childhood, because shortly after this bride will become pregnant, and that fundamentally
Yeah.
changes. So the transition between, at least in old India, childhood and adulthood, here is very like, just like death, overnight you change.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Whereas like, in here in the West or whatever, I mean, for many people, it's a very long transition across decades. But like, for some people, but like, yeah, here, like overnight you're changing. And, for you, not only were you getting married, but you had to leave like India itself, and you never knew whether you'd come back or what would happen. You're like, and right?
I didn't go for 9 years.
Yeah, didn't go to night. And at that time when you were sending letters, it took like a month to reach?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So it's like you had very limited contact.
Yeah.
And so it really was like you're transitioning to a new dimension that was inaccessible because you're the first person in your family who ever even went on a plane. So no one went. So for you, it was also... So the other interesting thing about this song is it doesn't offer any, I don't know, resolution or like... I don't know, like a happy vibe as to like, okay, now you got married or now you die and you go through the cycle again or something. This is meant as maybe, like a sad song to evoke emotions in oneself.
Evoke emotions and maybe telling people to think about the impermanence of things, that you don't get stuck to, this is it.
Yeah.
There are different things after death, who knows what happens. And then even when you are going somewhere else, and if you just continuously think about your past life in your parents' house, you have hard time. So I think probably
interesting. That makes sense. Your past life when you get married was your parents' house, and now you've, using words incorrectly, but you've been reincarnated into a new, and that way death too, you go through like, a new cycle. You go somewhere else, maybe your energy transforms into something else, and everything becomes different.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because like, I feel like some of the old world stuff had sorrow woven into it as a function of life itself.
Yeah, definitely.
And there are things out of your control, and especially for women, it was like your control and your childhood, everything is going.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, well, happy Mother's Day, Mother.
Thank you, Vita.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.